Hello adventurers, I am Bruce.
And I'm Ishin.
In today's episode, we are continuing our journey through time and history, exploring the last two of the 10 ghost towns we visited in New Mexico.
Join us as we uncover the stories behind these deserted settlements in part 2 of this two-part series.
In case you missed part 1, you can view it by clicking right up here. In this episode, we visit the two most authentic ghost towns we visited, Lake Valley and Shakespeare Ghost Town.
And at the end of this video, we reviewed that little bonus tip that we told you about in part 1, how to find ghost towns in your own area. There are more than 3,800 ghost towns in the United States. I'll bet there is one near you. We will show you how to find it, so stay tuned to the end for that.
Lake Valley was a town few people had ever heard of until 1878. That was the year a blacksmith named John Levitt took a lease on a claim that 2 days later discovered the most fabulous lode of silver the world has ever known. Called the Bridal Chamber, it was a hollow in the hillside with walls of solid horn silver. Before it was all over, a spur from the railroad was extended into the bridal chamber, and ore deposited directly into the ore cars. Total production from the chamber was about $2,775,000. Worthy of note is the name of George W. Lufkin, who, together with a partner, owned the claim on which Levitt later discovered the chamber. They sold the claim to the Sierra Grande Mining Company for $100,000, who in turn leased a portion to Levitt, who discovered the bridal chamber. Lufkin, the first discoverer of silver in the area, died penniless and is buried in the Lake Valley Cemetery.
The town moved twice before settling at its present site in 1882, when the bridal chamber mine in Lufkin's original claim was discovered. The walls of the subterranean mine were lined with silver so pure it was shipped and smelted to the U.S. Mint. The strike produced 2.5 million ounces of silver, including one chunk featured at the 1882 Denver Exposition, valued at $7,000 at a time when silver sold for just merely $1.11 an ounce. The mine manager was killed by Apache a few days after the discovery.
As a stage stop and railhead, Lake Valley grew to about 4,000 people, with 12 saloons, 3 churches, 2 newspapers, a school, stores, hotels, stamp mills, and smelters. The 1893 silver panic wiped it out, and a fire destroyed Main Street in 1895. The post office closed in 1954, and the last residents left in 1994.
The Bureau of Land Management now watches over the town and has set up a walking tour. The schoolhouse, built in 1904, is open to the public. A chapel and some old homes and railroad buildings still stand.
This town was a booming town because of the silver mine. It is a good example of how a town was rising because of its prosperity and then falling as a result of changing economic climate. When a great source of silver was found, many miners came, but when the price of silver plummeted, the miners left. Without the hope of making it rich, they had to move elsewhere.
You can still see the remnant of the school and the church. At one point, there were many kids attending this school, and there were people worshiping in the church. I don't know what they were praying for. Were they praying for a good find of gold or silver, or were they praying for their family members they left behind in the East? We think belief and faith were important to those people, as almost all ghost towns had a church or two. Here is what remains of a washing machine. I can imagine how happy the housewife must have been to own it. The harsh environment and constant sandstorms would make clothes very dirty. Washing clothes every day was a daunting task, and a washing machine would be a godsend. This is a graveyard of tin cans. I wonder how many kids, mothers, and miners thank God for these canned beans and vegetables. They did ease the headache of preparing meals.
Of the 9 ghost towns we have thus far visited, Lake Valley is by far the most authentic to what my definition of a true ghost town actually is. No one lives in Lake Valley, except the caretaker who lives in a trailer behind the schoolhouse. The town is gated and open to the public daily except on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and is free to visit.
If you want to see the school, you have to ring the buzzer and the caretaker will come out and let you in. There are no other buildings that you can go inside to see. The BLM sign says that they are looking into open all the buildings up at some time, but no date has been set as to when the buildings will be open. The best part of Lake Valley is owned by the mining company, and they have a keep out sign by the gate. You cannot get in to see the railroad depot or several of the mines and old houses. The gate sign reports that it is way too dangerous to get into these areas. Shakespeare Ghost Town is our 10th ghost town to visit. It is a paid entry venue. It is privately owned and the owner lives on site. It is billed as the West's most authentic ghost town, and we agree, especially after having visited the previous 9 ghost towns. It is listed as National Historical Site. Guided tours are at 10 a.m., 12 noon, and 3 p.m. Mountain Time. Admission is $15 for adults and $7 for children 6 to 12 years old. It is also a member of Harvest Host. Today, our guide is the owner.
What got things started in this spot is there was a small spring, and it was in the wash on the other side of town over here. It runs in between these 2 hills here. It's a clean and reliable spring. Because of the clean and reliable spring, in 1856, the Army put the first building here. It was a military relay station for the Army. We refer to it as a mail station. It was never used by the U.S. mail, however, I might add. And then 3 years later, in 1859, there was a stagecoach station put here as an alternate route. That led up to the Civil War. During the Civil War, you had the Confederates from Texas through this area first, on their way pushing west to the California gold fields. They were met up with resistance over in Arizona at Picacho Peak, and the Texans were pushed back through here by the Californians, and then the Californians would be through this area, after that. There were never any battles here that we know of, but the area during the Civil War and before the Civil War was just simply referred to as Mexican Springs because of that clean spring. After the Civil War, they reopened the stagecoach line, sent John Evanston, a stagekeeper, out here to reopen the stagecoach line for them, and they actually called this area Grant for a couple years. What really got things going here, though, is in 1869, 1870, they discovered silver outcroppings in the mountains to the south. In discovering those silver outcroppings, they got together with the president of a bank in California by the name of William Ralston. They would form a town here and call it Ralston City in his honor. And you had miners flocking here because of the silver. There were actually 3,000 miners here during this first mining boom. There are 150 to 200 structures scattered throughout these hills at that time. Not all of them adobe structures. There were plenty of tents, of course, as well. To give you an idea how vast it expanded, that big cemetery you passed on your way up here is the original cemetery for this town. This first mining boom, however, was very short. It was only about 3 years, because what they discovered about the silver here is once they got through those initial surface deposits, it didn't take them very long to figure out how hard and rocky this ground is. And the only way of getting equipment out here at that point was with freight wagons. That made things pretty tough on the miners and slowed things down quite a bit. A couple ingenious gentlemen, though, decided they'd like to keep things going strong for a while longer here, and supposedly smuggled in a cigar box full of diamonds and planted them in that mountain back there, that sharp peak back there, Lee's Peak, and started selling stock in diamonds. Now, if you've never heard of the diamond swindle of 1872 before, the Great Diamond Hoax, it was a very big deal. Not only were they supposedly planting the diamonds in that mountain, they were also supposedly planting them in Northern California, Colorado, and also Wyoming. It eventually all be blown up as a big hoax in Colorado. And when it was blown up as a big hoax, people started leaving town. They didn't want to be implicated in the scandal that would ensue. Now, the town didn't completely die at that point. The stagecoach line, of course, stayed open because of the water source.
Before it was Shakespeare, it was Ralston. Before it was Ralston, it was Grant. Before it was Grant, it was Mexican Springs. The site had a storied beginning in the late 1850s when the Butterfield Overland Stage Company established an alternate route south of its main line that passed the town of Shakespeare, at that time known as Mexican Springs. Because good water was abundant at Mexican Springs, the National Mail and Transportation Company established a mail stop at the site and renamed it Grant after Ulysses S. Grant of Civil War fame. Soon thereafter, William C. Ralston, founder of the Bank of California, became interested in the property and formed the New Mexico Mining Company to mine silver that had been discovered a short time before. The Ralston mining venture was short-lived, as claims had been hastily staked and improperly recorded. During the late 1870s, the Shakespeare Mining Company staked some silver claims and decided to change the name of the town from Ralston to Shakespeare. Mining operations continued until the Depression of 1929, when mining operations ceased.
Billy the Kid, after he broke out of jail in Silver City after robbing the Chinese laundry and escaping through the chimney, washed dishes in this building for a couple days to earn supplies to make it into Arizona. He hadn't killed anybody at that point. He was just a petty thief, and he was only here for a couple days. To make extra money from the stagecoach passengers, and they say the boys in here get bored drinking and bet each other who could shoot flies. Tin on the roofs didn't arrive till the second mining boom. The railroad brought the tin. Most of the original roofs were flat yucca stock platea roofs. You had dirt over the yucca stocks. You lined the ceilings with linen. You'll see examples as we go through the various buildings. About the only alcohol you're going to get in here would be primarily whiskey. This wouldn't be sipping whiskey. Be nasty stuff. Beer needs to be pasteurized to travel. That wasn't common until later.
This is the dining room of the hotel. You can see it is a very long table, and it's the major dining room for the miners. At one time, this town had 1,300 miners. Imagine how many could sit at this long table to get a hot meal at night, and the noise they made. This is an old blacksmith shop, which is very well equipped, as you can see. We don't recognize many of those blacksmith tools, but they were important in their day. This is a roasting pit. It can roast a pig or a leg of lamb. It can also cook a pot of soup or brew a pot of hot coffee.
In the last segment about Shakespeare Ghost Town, the owner talked about the Great Diamond Hoax. We researched a bit about it, and here is what we found. On November 25, 1872, one of the greatest hoax of the day was revealed when it was discovered that some of the biggest names in business had been conned into investing in the fake diamond field by two Kentucky swindlers.
Following the gold rush of 1849 and the silver rush of the Comstock lode in the 1859, it seems like the American West held endless possibilities for wealth. So when two Kentucky prospectors showed up at a bank in San Francisco in 1871 with a bag full of uncut diamonds, news of the gems quickly leaked to the founder of the bank, William C. Rustin. The two prospectors, Philip Arnold and John Slack, were tracked down, and eventually they were persuaded to divulge that they had found a major diamond field loaded with a variety of gems in such abundance that they could practically be plucked off the ground. Rustin alerted some of his business associates, and after the two prospectors reported they had returned to the diamond field and found even more stones, Rosen and his associates decided to try to buy the two men out.
But what Ralston didn't know was that Arnold and Slack were con men. The bags of diamonds they presented were actually ones of inferior quality that they had acquired, and as soon as they got money from Ralston, they used that money to secretly travel to London to buy more inferior uncut diamonds, along with some rubies, emeralds, and sapphires, just for good measure. Under the pretense of going through their diamond field along the Colorado-Wyoming border, although some newspapers would report it as being in Arizona, to find more gems for the businessmen, Arnold and Slack actually went there to salt their diamond field. When Arnold and Slack returned with the gems they had found, the businessman took a sample to famous diamond expert Charles Louis Tiffany in New York for authentication. However, for whatever reason, Tiffany nor his lapidary had any experience with uncut stones, so they valued these gems at far more than they were actually worth.
With luck still on his side, Arnold got more money from the businessman and once again secretly traveled to Europe to buy more low-quality uncut gems to further salt the so-called diamond field. Arnold and Slack's luck continued because when the businessman hired an expert mining engineer, Henry Jennings, to travel to the diamond field to authenticate it, Jennings somewhat concluded that diamond field was real. Deciding it was time to leave before the scheme collapsed, Arnold and Slack sold off the rest of their interest in the diamond field, netting an estimated $8 to $10 million in today's money.
The hoax was finally discovered when Janin happened to meet government geologist Clarence King on a train. King decided to take a look at the diamond field himself, and not long after he arrived, he and his team began noticing suspicious things about the site, like diamonds and other gems being found in places and groupings where they would not normally occur.
King immediately informed Ralston and the other investors about the fraud, and the news of the swindle broke in San Francisco's newspaper on November 25th, 1972, revealing that many high-profile figures from both coasts had been duped. When Arnold was eventually tracked down back home in Kentucky, he settled out of court and ended up only having to pay back a fraction of the money he had earned from the con. Slag was never found.
Okay, it's time for that bonus tip we talked about earlier, how to find ghost towns in your area. There is a website called www.ghosttowns.com that lists all the known ghost towns in the United States on a state-by-state and county-by-county basis. You will be amazed at how many there actually are. Our thanks to Michael Cook and Henry Chenoweth for their research and contributions to the Hillsborough Historical Society, where much of our information came from. As we look back on our 10 ghost town visits, we can't help but wonder what life must have been like back then and how difficult it must have been just to survive. It is amazing how strong the human spirit is when it comes to surviving such adventures more than 100 years ago. I hope that you get the feeling, as we did, that it is important to preserve these towns as historical sites that provide glimpses into New Mexico's rich and varied past. These towns may have lost their economic value, but their true value is the record of our history and that of human endeavors.
Our exploration of these ghost towns has been a journey through history, nostalgia, and natural beauty. Each town has its own unique story, embedded in the heart of New Mexico. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share.
And if you like, you can buy us a cup of coffee by clicking right up here. Until our next adventure, keep exploring.